want to thank everybody for coming and spending this time with me. It'll probably be an hour, 15, maybe an hour and a half, depending on how much interaction we have, how much questions and answers goes on. I want you to feel free to ask questions. I'll answer them as best I can. Subject matter is going to be a little bit different than probably what some of you are thinking, because I'm not really going to tell you what to eat and when to eat it and how to eat it. We're actually going to talk about weight loss around how we mentally process food, our emotions, the hormone aspect of it, not only the cognitive hormones that our brains produce, but also the physical hormones that our organs produce and how they all interact with our food, and our age and our activity level and all those things. So most of you know me. Just a couple of you I think that I don't know. I just want to give you a little bit of my background, which a lot of you know, but maybe some aspects of it you don't know. I've been a fitness trainer for over 25 years, and I've been doing nutritional work for almost 20 years, 19 years this spring. I'm really passionate. I love fitness, and you guys, I think almost everybody here has worked out with me, so you know I'm really passionate about the fitness aspect of things, but the nutrition piece is the part that people really struggle with. And I've become really passionate about it. As I've been getting older, the things that I did as a younger person aren't quite as effective. I used to be able to just beat on myself physically and keep my weight under check. But now that I've, over 29, I'm starting to realize that the nutrition piece, I have to dial it in even more. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. But my background as far as what we're going to discuss tonight is that I was a heavy kid. By the time I was in junior high, I weighed about 200 pounds. And I didn't really have any muscle on my body. I was very sedentary, very depressed almost, even as a young girl. I knew that I was bigger than most of the kids in my class. I probably weighed more than most of the boys. And I probably started overeating. I kind of did the math a while ago. One of my clients and I were talking about it. I think it was about 8 years old when I started to consciously be aware of the fact that I was emotionally overeating, basically buffering my feelings as a little kid with food. And I remember, we always got an allowance. I don't know if kids get allowance anymore, but we got allowance. And I would go to the store across from our house, and I would buy those Heath Toffee candy bars. And back then, they were twice the size as they are now. And I would, take them to my bedroom and gobble them down. And I just kind of kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I kind of did that right through till probably puberty really hit, and I kind of discovered boys. And once I discovered boys, I kind of started to rein in the eating a little bit. And by the time I graduated high school, I was down to about 150 pounds. But again, no muscle mass. I had no muscle. So I was kind of, I call it skinny fat. I was lean for the most part, but I was jiggly. In my early 20s, I developed an eating disorder. And it started out, I was trying to be, I guess, anorexic. But I was a failed anorexic because I got hungry and I started with bulimia. And I ended up quite bulimic. By the time I was 21, I was down to about 118 pounds. And I was eating about 400 calories a day, mostly air pop popcorn. And ended up in an eating disorder clinic in Philadelphia for 3 months. And while I was there, I learned a lot about why I was doing what I was doing, how it all kind of came about. And I also discovered that if I started working out, which was part of the program there, that I could actually start to eat and gain some muscle. And voila, all these years later, that's kind of been my MO. I've always been able to manage my weight through my exercise until menopause kind of started to hit, probably late 40s. I'm 53 now. I really became conscious of the fact that eating the way I had been eating, which was not overeating, but just the foods, the way I was eating them, I was starting to gain weight again. And I had to revamp what I was doing. And that's kind of some of what I want to talk to you guys about tonight. I know some of you are nowhere near menopause, and that's fine. And some of you don't have menopause, you don't even have to worry about it. But we are all getting older, so and the body responds accordingly. So with that said, tonight we're going to basically discuss 3 secrets to losing weight and about ourselves that will be helpful for you guys. Definitely was really helpful for me. And some of it will just give you a feeling of that you're on the right track, because a lot of times if you're starting to gain weight a little bit or you're feeling uncomfortable in your body, you think you're doing something wrong. And you're not necessarily doing something wrong, but you just might not understand exactly what's going on. So the first thing that I wanted to mention is that I am going to be doing a Stop Overeating workshop. And some of you know about it. I did promote it on Facebook. It's going to start next week on Wednesday, same time, in the same space. And it's going to be delving into a deeper level of what we're going to talk about tonight. So I just wanted to kind of let you know that that's kind of where this is going. But I'm going to give you a lot of information tonight. So regardless of whether or not you decide to do the continuing education part of this, I want you to get as much out of this evening as you can. I did print up a little worksheet for you. We're going to kind of follow that. The last page is for you to kind of think about and contemplate on your own, like after you leave here tonight, tomorrow, or the next day. Take notes if you want to. You don't have to if you don't want to. Michael is, thank you, Michael, so much. He's recording this for us. So I'm actually going to post it to my private YouTube channel, and I can send you a link to it so you can actually watch it after. And, for reiteration or pure, entertainment. But anyway, so I want to have a little participation from the audience. No pressure, but I just kind of wanted to get a feel for why you're here tonight, because you could be somewhere else, but there must be something about the subject matter that you found interesting. Jan? Awesome. So pre-diabetes and the blood pressure is climbing a little bit. Okay. We're going to talk about diabetes tonight quite a bit. So it's a great, thank you for coming. Anybody else? Kathy? Okay. Yep. All right, we're gonna address that tonight. So awesome, Marianne. Okay. And I think a lot of us can relate to that, because it's just, especially through the winter months, because we're not, and hopefully it's coming. I don't know, the weather hasn't been that great, but we're getting there. Okay, so this process that we're going to go through tonight, the information is stuff that our parents didn't know about. They couldn't really educate us about it. It would have been awesome if they could have. And those of you that are grandparents or parents, and even friends and family members, you can share a lot of this information with people in your life, because it's applicable to everybody. We live in a world where food is everywhere. And it's really hard sometimes to decide what's good food, what's bad food. And we're not really going to talk a whole lot about food in and of itself. We're going to talk about some problematic foods that most people struggle with, that are challenging, to say the least, for most of us. So when we look at being overweight, the main cause for overweight is overeating. And that's across the board. Our bodies are made to store fat. Our bodies store fat, and that is just the way we were created. And when if we are experiencing overweight on any level, unless you have, sometimes you may have a thyroid condition or something like that, which is really a smaller percentage of the population. So if you are experiencing overweight, whether you're 7 pounds that you're struggling with or 107 pounds that you're struggling with, overweight is caused by overeating. The overeating part is interesting, though, because there are two main reasons for overeating. So I'm going to kind of branch this off. And one is over-desire. And over-hunger. And we're going to talk about both of these a lot tonight, okay? Over-desire is caused, it's more of a mental, emotional thing. We're going to really get into detail about why we have over-desire and how to kind of arrest that. Over-hunger is hormonal. It's not only the psychological hormones that our body make, but also the physiological hormones that our body makes. Some people might be just dealing with over-desire. Some of you might just have over-desire. Some of you might just have over-hunger, the hormonal aspect. But most people are dealing with some kind of a combination of both, maybe one more than the other. You're going to have to decide that for yourself, but we're going to talk about both aspects of this so that you can kind of figure out which works for you, okay? So the number one secret that I wanted to share, because there's going to be 3 secrets, and this one is going to resonate with you, is that when you're dealing with this, overeating, willpower does not work. That's the number one secret. Willpower does not work. The reason why willpower does not work is because research has proven people have a limited supply of willpower. Everybody has willpower up to a point, right? And we all have different levels of we all have different levels of willpower, you know, like but in the long run, willpower does not work to control overeating. We run out of it. And when we run out of it, a lot of people just kind of throw in the towel. So if you start on a diet and you're like, okay, I'm going to do this, and you determine you're going to do the paleo diet or the keto diet or you name it. There's a bazillion of them out there to choose from, and I'm not advocating for any of them, and I'm not dissuading you from any of them. But if you are relying on willpower to keep you from doing this and following any kind of nutritional program, you're going to struggle. It's almost like if you think about, you know those big beach balls filled with air? And you're in the pool and you're holding that beach ball under the water. And how long can you do that? How long can you hold it under? You might be able to hold it for a while. After a while, it's going to become really challenging to do that. And you're not going to be able to do it anymore. So if we can solve for the underlying issues, the over-desire and the over-hunger, we can eliminate this without using willpower. And that's what I want to work on with you tonight. So, kind of did that part. All right, so in trying to figure out where this over-desire and this over-hunger come from, I've got clients they'll say to me, Lisa, I can't stop. You know, I just love food. I just love it. And, you know, I've had people tell me food is my friend. I'm going to tell you people, food is not your friend. Food does not love you back. It's not going to keep you company when you're old. It's really an inanimate, it's for fuel. And a lot of times we assign so much emotion to food that it becomes counterproductive. And a lot of times, this over-desire, and this is what we're going to talk about first, is that mental, emotional piece, is that we're trying to soothe something, usually something emotional. And we're going to kind of go into depth about that, because there are actually hormones that are also part of this process as well, this over-desire. And some of this stuff you guys are going to be familiar with. I don't want to get really technical on the science end of it. I want to kind of keep it really simple. But the main hormone that's produced by your brain that affects this over-desire is dopamine. And dopamine is produced by some cell nerves in your brain that when you eat particular foods, your brain basically lights up like the Vegas Strip at night. And there are two particular food items, and I call them items because I don't really consider them food. And we're going to talk about these two things a lot. One is flour, and the other is sugar. And both flour and sugar are condensed, consolidated, refined products. They've been ground down. Fiber, where they occur naturally, a wheat berry has got tons of fiber, it's got protein, it's got all kinds of things within that wheat berry. But they take the bran off, they take the wheat germ out, they grind it down into a fine white powder, then they bleach it. They've extracted all the nutrients from it, so they put artificial, man-made vitamins and minerals back into it. That's your enriched white flour. And the stuff, guys, is like crack cocaine in your brain when you ingest it in your system. Same thing with sugar. Sugar cane, in its pure form, has tons of fiber. But what do? We extract it out, we refine it down. They actually have a process where because it would be brown. You know, you've seen the sugar in the raw, where it's kind of that. They actually bleach the sugar out as well, which all these processes add chemicals to the sugar in the flour. And so when you ingest it, what happens with the dopamine is it creates over-desire in the brain. So when you first start eating it, your brain learns that it feels really good on flour and sugar. And flour and sugar seems to be in almost everything, especially processed foods. And even sometimes if you don't even realize that the flour is in the processed food, because it's under other names, you don't even realize that there's actually extracted, ground down product in it, like dextrose, which is derived from corn, ground down and added to your food. So the thing is, with these food companies that are manufacturing these food items, like think about McDonald's, or think about, oh goodness, Dunkin' Donuts, just about any fast food place. They have a research team of scientists that come in and they develop these highly addictive foods. They know about this over-desire. And they ply us with their wares. And it starts out as children, right? You know, as kids. I mean, I know as a kid, I always wanted to go to McDonald's. And it's even more so now because we know more about the brain. These scientists that work for McDonald's, they know this stuff. So it's even more addictive now than it was when I was a kid growing up. So these dopamine receptors in your brain are kind of like a docking system. And as your brain secretes the dopamine into your system, they rest on these neurotransmitters in your brain. And what happens over time as you continue to eat flour and sugar, they downregulate. So those dopamine receptors are not as sensitive to the dopamine. So it requires basically your brain sends your body a signal that it needs more and more flour and sugar to reach that same level of stimulation in the brain. This stuff is going on, guys. You don't even know it's happening. This is what goes on. And it makes it so difficult to get off this stuff. I mean, think about other things that mankind, manufacturing, things that we have refined down, condensed, and concentrated. Can you think of anything other than flour and sugar that we've done this to? Kind of. Coffee, to a certain degree, because we do it and we extract out the caffeine, and caffeine can be very addictive, so yes. I'm thinking more along the lines of, how about alcohol? We take grapes and we concentrate that juice, and then we introduce the fermentation process. So not only do we have a concentrated juice, but we've also made it a toxin, and we like it. And it does the same thing. So over time, those of you who do drink alcohol, you'll notice that one glass of wine doesn't really seem to cut it anymore, because your dopamine receptors have downregulated. So you might be up to 2 glasses of wine. Other things, heroin, cocaine. We've taken cocoa leaves and we extract out and we make, well, not we, but people. Hopefully not we. But there are a lot of things when you start to think about it, even just juice in general, right? Because we take all the fiber out of it, right? We concentrate it. And even juice in the system can cause over-desire. But I'm not going to say don't drink juice, and I'm not going to say don't drink wine or anything like that. But I am going to really implore you to try to cut out the flour and the sugar from your diet. There are situations where, and we're going to talk about this more in the program starting next week. I do advocate for some joy eating, which might mean, on special occasions where you might have cake, you might have whatever that is that you love. Scalloped potatoes, whatever it is. It's got flour and sugar in it. But joy eating, I'm a real advocate that it should be planned. You should know 24 hours in advance that you're going to do it. That way you're not setting yourself up to just say, hey, I'm just going to have it. Because usually when you say, hey, I'm just going to have it, this is what's going on. Your over-desire is happening. And your neurotransmitters remember the pleasure from the other sugar and flour that you've had, and you create that desire in the moment. And it's hard to talk yourself out of it in the moment. So if you know in 24 hours you're going to get together with girlfriends or guy friends and you're going to go out to dinner and you're going to have dessert that night, awesome. Enjoy every bite of it. But when it becomes a daily practice and we're constantly trying to give ourselves pleasure through food, we're really just ramping this up. And we're creating trouble for ourselves because it's hard to stop this. It's an addiction. It's an addiction. And the food companies don't care about you. Their bottom line is to keep their stockholders happy and make money for their company. So it's up to us as individuals to actually advocate for ourselves and take care of ourselves so that we don't end up with disease states, so we don't end up with full-blown type 2 diabetes. We don't end up with heart disease and a cavalcade of other metabolic-related diseases that can come through eating refined products in general, man-made products. Okay, so that's a little bit about over-desire. We're going to kind of come back to this a little bit because we're going to talk a little bit about the emotional side of over-desire. But I wanted to shift now to over-hunger. And over-hunger, as I mentioned earlier, is very hormonally driven. And so the secret number 2 is there is nothing wrong with you. Your hormones are out of whack. So if you're gaining weight, there's nothing wrong with you. Your body is doing what it was made to do. Your hormones are causing the problem. But we have to bring some consciousness to the hormones so we can kind of regulate what we're doing. So I'm going to flip this over here. All right, so if you are trying to lose weight, what do you think the number one thing is that you should be eating in order to lose weight? Does anybody have any? Jean Marie? Vegetables? Anybody else? Protein? Anybody else? Fiber, fruit? The number one thing you should be eating if you are trying to lose weight is your own body fat. That's the number one thing you should be eating. Yes, we need protein. Yes, we need vegetables. Yes, we need fruit. We obviously need fiber. But when you're trying to reduce body fat, and I'm like less, a lot of times people talk about weight, and it's a number on a scale. I'm less concerned with the weight on the scale. Anybody who's done nutrition with me, and quite a few of you in here have, know that I don't idealize a certain number on the scale. I'm an advocate of how much body fat you're carrying, how much is healthy for your body. So if you are trying to reduce and take that 7 pounds off, you need to get your body into a position so that it's actually eating its own fat. How do we do that? How do we do that? So this is where we're going to start to talk about hormones. The number one hormone that we need to look at to lose body fat is insulin. Insulin is a hormone, as you guys probably know, produced by your pancreas. And the insulin that your body secretes is to help your body to store fat and to store nutrients for future use. So on all the little cells of your body, you have little receptors. And I like to think about them as like little locks on the cell. So when you eat, and whether you eat carbohydrates, whether you eat protein, whether you eat fat, your body uses insulin in order to process those things. So a lot of times people think insulin just has to do with carbohydrates, but it doesn't. All the macronutrients that we eat actually utilize insulin. So with insulin, we need to learn how to regulate it. And in learning how to regulate it, I'm going to explain to you how it goes up. So with type 2 diabetes, insulin levels are really high in the system. With type 1 diabetes, insulin is not present or present in very small amounts. The pancreas usually happens in childhood. The pancreas stops producing enough insulin. Back in the day, before they really understood and were able to administer insulin, little kids just withered away and died. Their parents didn't even know what was wrong with them. But their bodies weren't able to extract the nutrients into the cells. In this country, most people are dealing with type 2 diabetes or metabolic syndrome. Your doctor might have mentioned metabolic syndrome, and also insulin resistance, which is almost like a precursor to diabetes. So what happens with these cells, the little locks on the cell, when you are overdoing things like flour and sugar, your body, your pancreas is producing a lot of insulin because it's trying to get the blood sugar levels down. When your blood sugar levels are really high, your brain sends a signal to the pancreas, hey, we got to get some of this sugar out of here. This is not good. So and most people don't realize that what they're ingesting is creating kind of a vicious cycle with this. They aren't really adjusting what they're eating. So it's a non-stop process until you end up in a situation where your doctor says, hey, your blood sugar is really high. We got to get this down. We're going to give you some medication. It's going to either A, help your body use the insulin it's producing more efficiently and more effectively, or we're going to have to give you insulin because the pancreas is just like overtaxed because it's been working so hard to try to keep up with the high blood sugar that is exhibiting in your system. So the things that make insulin increase, number one is just eating. Eating in general, whether it be fat, carbohydrates, protein, any combination thereof. Anytime you're eating anything, insulin is going to be secreted by the pancreas. Insulin is not a villain here, and I don't want to give you the impression that it is. It's not. We need insulin, as we mentioned before, with juvenile diabetes, type 1 diabetes. If it's not there, we end up dead. So we have to have insulin. And then the number 2 thing that makes insulin go up is, again, it's our sugar and flour. So regular eating, not including these highly processed concentrated foods, will make the insulin go up, and the body will efficiently work through and do its thing. Insulin levels come down once it's kind of done its magic. With flour and sugar, the insulin goes through the roof. Your body secretes a ton of it. So then what happens is the insulin starts working, it pulls the sugar out of the bloodstream, brings it into those little locks on your cell, and stores it as body fat. Then what happens? The blood sugar levels get low, and your brain again goes, hey, something's going on here, we need more sugar. And then you start to get over hunger. Regular hunger is normal. We want to be hungry, but we want to be legitimately hungry, not over hungry. Over hunger comes when we OD on sugar and flour. So, and speaking about insulin a little bit, I just wanted to mention this. That there was a guy who weighed about 350 pounds, and he decided to go on a fast, and it was a doctor-supervised fast. He spent an entire year fasting on water and electrolytes, again, being monitored by physicians. He lost over 200 pounds in a year. And when you think about that, how many meals he had stored on his body as body fat. If you do the math, over 1,400 full meals that he was able to basically dine in, right? Dine in and eat off his body. Now, I'm right about my natural normal body weight. I weigh about 145 pounds. I have about 50 full meals stored on my body. 50. So if you've got 20 pounds to lose, 30 pounds to lose, 50 pounds to lose, think how many meals you actually have stored on your body. So we want to be able to access that body fat. And by doing that, we will be able to, the number one thing we want to be able to do is to regulate our insulin. So how do we do that? How do we help our body to access its stored body fat as fuel? We don't want to stop eating. That's not what I'm advocating for. But we do want to reduce our eating, reduce our caloric intake. And in doing that, I'm a big advocate of the intermittent fast. And I try to make it really easy for my clients. There's a 12-hour window between the time you get done eating and the time you get up in the morning and you have breakfast. So let's say you stop eating at 7 o'clock at night. Wait until 7 o'clock the next morning. Number one, you're sleeping, so it's not going to be, you're not going to be really struggling with these guys because you're going to be out like a light. So the intermittent fast is a great way to do that. A lot of people, you think about your average person. You wake up in the morning, you eat breakfast. 10:30, you have a snack. Lunchtime, you eat lunch. Afternoon snack. Dinner. Dessert. After dinner, TV snack. So the average American is almost constantly eating. The thing is that if you want to get your body fat down and reduce body fat, you've got to be able to get the insulin down. When insulin is high in your system, you are not going to lose body fat. It's physically impossible. So the intermittent fasting, so like let's say you have dinner at 8 o'clock, then don't have breakfast until at least 8 o'clock the next morning. It takes about 8 hours for your body to just process your last meal. So you've got that 8-hour cycle, and then you've got 4 hours where your body can actually pull from that stored fat. But if you legitimately want to access that stored body fat, the intermittent fast overnight is a great way to do it. And then, guys, this is really, I'm going to just say, try to get rid of that. Go ahead. Yeah? Uh-huh. Fasting can be effective. The main thing, I guess, to think about is if you do, like, let's say you do a 3-day juice fast over the weekend. If you're going to be setting yourself up to be over hungry, over desirous of food by doing that process, it's probably not going to work for you. It's really unique to your own personality and what drives you, what motivates you. So for some people, I would say if you wanted to do, you know, a light fast like that, juice I'd be really careful of because of what we talked about. That concentrated sugar can really set you up, that dopamine response, it can really wreak havoc with you. I'd rather you eat the fruit than to drink the juice. But with that said, you know, some people can do a fast for a shorter period of time and be fine with it. But it's really unique to each individual. Some people, it would just totally set them up to just go crazy on Monday. And that's not what we want to do. Exactly. Right. And then you just, you end up kind of mad at yourself, and, and really, a lot of it, the whole dieting cycle, it's like a lot of self-shaming. Like you try so hard and you're relying on willpower, and, so you don't want to set yourself up for that kind of mental abuse, right? I mean, life's hard enough without beating yourself up. So right? Okay. Let me see here. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
Hi.
In regards to sugar, the sugar test of sugar, I try to stay away from sugar. However, being in Vermont, I put maple syrup in my coffee, and every morning I have oatmeal. I put maple syrup in my oatmeal. Is maple syrup that high in sugar as like a chocolate bar or stuff like that? And two, the other thing that's big that I'm guilty of is I eat a lot of yogurt.
Mm-hmm.
Probably, I don't want to say that I eat 2 individual cups of yogurt a day, but I'll probably average a week, about 12.
Okay. And it's the prepared yogurt that's got like fruit in it or something like that, like Chobani or... Okay. Okay, let's talk about that for a little bit, because those are good questions. Maple syrup is sugar just like cane sugar is sugar. Your body doesn't know that it comes from Vermont and it was sap in a tree. Again, it's a refined product. Think about it. You take a whole couple of gallons of sap to make a little pint of syrup, right? So it's very condensed down. So I'm not going to say don't have maple syrup. I'm not telling anybody here, don't have maple syrup, don't have sugar of any kind. But when you do have it, you need to be aware of what's going on inside you. Because whether it's maple syrup, honey, raw sugar, brown sugar, molasses. They're all concentrated sources of sugar. Some are healthier than others, you know, like white cane sugar. Like we said, it's kind of a bleached out product. Maple syrup is probably a better alternative, but physiologically the same thing is going to happen in your system with your insulin response, regardless of where it's coming from. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, in regard to your yogurt consumption, when you look at Chobani, the one of the sweetened ones that has the fruit in it, it's loaded with sugar. They make a syrup. They put a little fruit in it, but they make a syrup out of sugar. And it's in the bottom of the cup. And when you stir it up, you're adding that sugar into your yogurt. Now, yogurt's a naturally occurring source of sugar as well. From the milk itself has sugar in it. And then they add the extra sweetener to it. So to be honest with you, most prepared yogurts like that, you might as well have a candy bar in a way as far as the sugar content is concerned. Okay? The thing is what I would recommend is that you buy the unsweetened yogurt and add your own fruit to it. Real fruit, fresh fruit, berries, banana, pineapple, whatever you like. And make your own Chobani without the added sugar, the syrup. They actually add liquid sugar to it, which is even more, as far as the insulin goes, is even more pronounced. Your brain just goes off like a rocket. Sorry? Yeah, Joan? They usually do, right. You're almost better to have the full fat plain and add your own fruit to it. But it's interesting, if you take the number of grams of sugar on the back of any product you're looking at, divide it by 4, will tell you how many teaspoons of sugar are in that product. And it's kind of crazy, guys, because you don't realize how much sugar is in things until you start looking at the labels or learn how to read them. So take the sugar grams, divide by 4, and that will tell you how many teaspoons are in a serving. And then you also got to look at your serving size. You know, like if you're getting the individual Chobanis, that's one thing. But a lot of things, you know, we just kind of dole it out of the big container. And maybe we're having 2 or 3 servings. So to kind of keep track of where that sugar is coming from. And it's in everything. It's in ketchup. It's in bread. It's in almost all baked products now. Any kind of manufactured baked products. Cereal is loaded with it. Not only are you getting the sugar, but you're also getting double whammy, right? So it's interesting. It really, once you start really becoming aware of where this stuff is in your nutrition and how it's keeping you from getting what you want. Because if you want to reduce your body fat, you've got to get that insulin down. Go ahead, Kat. Artificial sweeteners, no, number one, you're looking at a chemical that is derived through whatever means, usually a refining process of some sort. What happens with most artificial sweeteners is that your body physiologically is expecting sugar. It actually will make your insulin go up regardless of the fact that sugar is really there because your brain thinks it is. So your brain's sending a signal to your pancreas, make insulin. And you end up then, because it's not there, craving sugar. You end up craving real sugar. People that drink tons of diet soda are constantly dealing with this. Constantly. And they end up, if they're not drinking it in the soda, but they're getting it somewhere else. They're getting it in cookies, brownies, pie, whatever they're doing at the end of the day. There's a guy, he just passed away actually. He was a guy that I worked for. I'm a manufacturer's rep for a company out in California. The guy drank at least a case of Diet Coke a day. I'm not lying to you. This guy drank Diet Coke ad nauseum. About 10 years ago, he had a stroke. They directly attributed it to his Diet Coke consumption. And he recently, at the age of 54, passed away from complications. He did cut out the Diet Coke, but But yeah, it really hurt. I mean, and he had a bad stroke. I mean, it really debilitated him, his ability to, walk and speak and stuff. So do you really want to mess around with artificial sweeteners? The food companies want you to think, yeah, right? But they don't care about you. They care about their bottom line. They care about their stockholders. They want to sell stuff. So it's up to you to advocate for yourself. And eat real food. It's really about eating real food with the fiber as it was intended to be consumed. Maybe 50 years ago when your grandparents were baking bread or whatever, the grains that they produced back then are different than the grains that they produce now. We've hybridized wheat. We've taken the protein part, the gluten part, and we've made it exponentially bigger through this special hybrid that they do in a laboratory to make this grain that your body actually doesn't even recognize as being real food. But it's still doing this thing to you. The insulin goes through the roof. When you look at imaging of the brain on heroin, the brain on cocaine, the brain on sugar and flour, unless you were a scientist, you would not know the difference looking at how the brain lights up. A scientist could say, yeah, that's that and that. But a normal person looking at it, it just looks crazy. It looks like the Vegas Strip on a Friday night. So, any questions about the insulin at all? Okay. A lot of what we're talking about, one of the ladies that's here tonight, she had messaged me on Facebook about wine, and that wine or alcohol in general can almost be substituted here for flour and sugar. As far as the response in the brain is concerned, it does the same thing. But then you're also dealing with a neurotoxin, which affects your cognition, which makes you make even worse choices about food when you've drank it. So I'm not saying don't drink alcohol, but I am saying really watch this stuff. Really watch this stuff, because if you want your body fat down, this is not your friend. This does not love you back. It's not going to get you healthier. Sorry? With my clients, I usually don't limit fruit as long as you're eating it in its whole state, because it's got the fiber there. And the fiber slows down how quickly insulin gets to the sugar in the fruit and to your system. It regulates it. So naturally occurring fruit. Now, like we mentioned earlier about juice and stuff, you've gotten the fiber out of there. It's kind of your mainlining sugar to your system. With juice of any kind, especially like, apple juice, grape juice, it's like through the roof. Your insulin levels skyrocket. They skyrocket. So eat apples, eat grapes, eat pineapples instead of pineapple juice. Eat real food. Eat real food. The closer to as it was grown, the better. The better. People ask me, well, Lisa, I'm gluten intolerant, so I'm not eating white wheat flour. But all these new flours that they've developed, these gluten-free flours, they're actually more highly addictive and produce more insulin response in the body than wheat does. People don't know that. But the food companies say, okay, well, you can't have wheat. Well, we're going to do rice flour. We're going to do almond flour. We're going to refine down all these other things. And a lot of them are bleached because people want white bread. They want it to look like white bread. Udo's, is that one of the gluten-free bread lines? All their bread is white, even though they're made out of brown rice flour and things like that. So as much as you can, guys, I'm a big advocate for getting flour in all of its forms out of your nutrition as much as you can, unless it is that 24-hour planned joy eating that you're going to do. You've planned for it. You're not leaving it willy-nilly. You're not setting yourself up to do it the next day because you need 24 hours in advance, right? So it will really help curtail this insulin response. The lower you can keep your insulin, the more you're going to access your body fat as fuel. Once you've started to become fat adaptive, which is when your body is burning its body fat, your over hunger starts to go away. At first, though, when you first get off the flour and sugar, it ramps up. It literally ramps up. Part of it is physiological, part of it is psychological. Physiologically, you go into withdrawal, just like you're coming off a drug. Because as far as your brain is concerned, and those dopamine receptors that we talked about, they want more of it. You've trained your body to actually want that dopamine hit. You've gotten used to it. And this is all happening behind the scenes. You just know that you love cake, right? You love chocolate chip cookie. You think you love it, but your brain is addicted to it. Go ahead. You can, and some people are successful at that. Some people can also slowly go off smoking cigarettes, right? Other people can't. Other people can't. Regardless of whether you go cold turkey and get off sugar and flour or kind of wean yourself off it, I'm going to be honest with you, when you wean yourself off it, you're actually delaying and making it more troublesome for yourself. Because really, physiologically, you're addicted to sugar for about 48 hours and flour, about 48 hours, where you're actually chemically coming off it. There is still fallout, but that's more of the practice of it and the over-desire for it. But the over-hunger for it is greatly reduced after 48 hours. Go ahead, Maggie.
Eating a lot of fruit, so with the natural sugars, doesn't that somewhat compensate for going off the other sugars?
Really, the only way you could really overdo fruit is if you were just eating gobs of fruit. And I don't think that's the case with you. Right. I mean, if you were just having fruit all day long and not trying to lower your insulin by just kind of watching what you're eating and not eating every hour on the hour, fruit's okay. Fruit's not your enemy. Fruit's not sugar and flour are your enemy. I like to say vegetables and fruit, okay, because really, fruit is nice, and fruit has a lot of fiber, has a lot of vitamins, has a lot of minerals. Your body really needs vegetables more than it needs fruit. Well, that's because of the natural sugar in it, right? It's the dopamine. But there's a difference between being desiring something. Our bodies naturally desire food. That's natural, normal. We want our bodies to, that's part of the pleasure of living. It's this over-desire we want to get rid of. Does that make sense? The over-desire is where we're getting in trouble. It's where our type 2 diabetes is coming from. It's where our hypertension is coming from, our heart disease. It's consuming too much, and primarily flour and sugar. Okay, I wanted to talk a little bit about over-desire in relation to emotion. Because if you were to eliminate overeating, flour and sugar, and things that are uploading your dopamine to crazy levels, if you were to reduce that, you're usually left over with some emotions that you're sitting with usually that are sometimes challenging to sit with. So a lot of us develop the habit of overeating. You get home from work, you've had a stressful day. You either stop for something quick on the way home, maybe quick drive-through. Maybe you get home and you pour yourself a glass of wine, trying to detox from the day. A lot of that is driven by stress and emotion, things that we're not dealing with or able to process completely. And we're turning to outside buffers, food, alcohol, recreational drugs. I mean, we could go as far as saying social media, over Netflixing, pornography. There's so many things that we do to distract ourselves from our emotions. And not everybody overeats for emotional reasons, but I know that's been something that I've dealt with. And I know most of my clients that I've done nutrition with also have some aspect of dealing with emotion. So in the workshop that's following up next week, we're going to do a lot of deep diving into the psychology behind overeating, the think, feel, act cycle. Circumstances in our life, it's going to happen. Things are going to happen. Our thoughts create emotions. Our emotions create actions that we take, and our actions result in outcomes that we have in our lives. We're going to deal with the outcome of being overweight and kind of work it backwards. To look at some of our beliefs about food, some beliefs about the biology of our belief in general, just what we think about ourselves, what we think about our lives. Because when it's all said and done, we're sitting with what our lives are. So if you're constantly turning to overeating, overdrinking, to buffer what's going on with you, we need to look at our lives a different way. And it doesn't necessarily mean you need to change your life, but you need to change how you're thinking about your life so that you're not turning to this as a way to cope. Because this, if you're sitting in here and you're worried about being overweight, you don't want to buffer anymore. You want to get to the bottom of why this is happening. And it's happening because of the emotions and the mental piece and the dopamine piece and the hormonal response with the insulin. So if we can solve for these, we can eliminate this. And that's what the next workshop is primarily going to focus on. I don't know if you guys had a chance to, I know some of you have Facebook and some of you don't, but I just kind of wanted to give you a quick, over here somewhere, what we're going to kind of delve into over the next 4 weeks. Week 1, protocol for detoxing from refined flour and sugar. So we're going to work together as a group to get off flour and sugar for 30 days. I want you to give me 30 days to get you off it. Not only off it physically, the 48 hours, that's kind of rough, but actually to actually get your body to the point where you're not doing this. And it happens pretty fast. And when you have support around it, it's even better because it's just not you trying to willpower it out at home by yourself. Also in week 1, we are going to look at identifying emotional versus physical hunger and really what that looks like. So that I have a graphic that I'm going to provide for you, which kind of takes you through. This is what emotional hunger looks like. This is what physical hunger looks like to help you delineate. Because a lot of times, some people, they haven't had a real legitimate hunger pain maybe their whole life. Because we go from one meal to a snack, to a meal, to a snack, to dinner, to dessert, to a snack. And then we're in a coma because we had so much flour and sugar. And then we wake up the next day, usually exhausted, and we start the cycle all over again. So we're going to look at that, the emotional aspect of it versus the physical aspect of it to help you get in touch with where you might be with it. And sometimes you might be physically hungry, and sometimes you might be emotionally hungry, but it'll help bring awareness to it so that you're not fighting your own natural inclinations. Whenever we know better, we do better. So it's just bringing awareness to that process. And then also week 1, we are going to learn about the hunger scale and kind of where you are. So when you're gauging whether or not to eat, because remember, we want to try to reduce insulin. So where we are on that hunger scale so that you're able to make the choice whether or not you want to dine in or dine out. And if you want to lose weight, you need to dine in more often. Week 2, we are going to really dive into that think, feel, act cycle that I talked about earlier. Really looking at how our thoughts and feelings create our actions that cause us to do various things, including overeating and eating things we know that aren't good for us or aren't going to get us to our goal. And that's pretty involved. There's going to be a little bit of homework with that one. Not crazy homework, but a little bit of homework. Week 3, we are going to talk about exercise. You guys know that that's what I do, really. I mean, physical activity is my first job. Nutrition is my second job, probably my most passionate one. But we're going to look at how exercise plays into the weight loss cycle, where exercise is really beneficial and where exercise isn't quite as beneficial as you might think. And we're going to really look at that dynamic. And we're also going to look a little bit more into our feelings, because our feelings drive so much of what we do. And then on week 4, we are going to look at, be a happy person experiencing a negative situation, not letting that negative situation become who we are. And just how to basically not let ourselves get sidelined by life so that we don't resort back to doing this. So it's a 4-week-long program. I am going to record it. So if there's part of it that you can't attend, I'll be able to send you the video the next day and give you the homework. So you're not ever going to be behind if you can't physically be here for all 4. And that's pretty much it. Are there any questions beyond what we've discussed? Go ahead, Art.
How about sugar and flour?
Yep.
How does salt come in?
Salt, over salt and mined salt can be problematic. Mined, M-I-N-E-D, mined, like Morton salt. So like a lot of people are doing like Himalayan salt now, or Hawaiian black salt, things like that. We need a certain amount of sodium in our nutrition, just for our heart electricity. It's an electrolyte that we have to have present. If you're dealing with hypertension and stuff like that, I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to say don't have salt. I'm not going to say do have salt. A lot of foods naturally have sodium in them, like tomatoes are a fairly high source of sodium. But if you're hypertensive and your doctor says cut out salt, cut out salt. I'm less concerned about salt as far as we're dealing with this overweight. And yes, if you're eating a lot of processed food, it's got a lot of sodium in it. So the combination of the sodium along with your flour and your sugar, it's kind of a lethal bomb. So by cutting out the processed food, you're going to eliminate a lot of added sodium just naturally. Does that make sense? Okay. But you're right. Sodium is in your meal at McDonald's, it's like between a hamburger, a French fry, and a soda at McDonald's, you've already overdone it for the day for what the RDA recommends for your sodium intake. So by cutting out those foods that have been basically scientifically orchestrated to suck you in, you're going to eliminate a lot of extra sodium naturally. So by sticking to, plant-based foods, eating as close to the earth as possible, eating food in its natural state as opposed to eating processed food, things that whenever man kind of gets in there and messes with it, it changes everything. It changes everything. So, go ahead, Diane. I'm sorry? Almond milk? Yeah. Yeah, I would say definitely go with the unsweetened ones. Yep. Yeah, I know a lot of people are even making their own now. It's pretty easy to make. But again, just trying to watch the sugar, because a lot of them have a ton of, when we do that math, like I was explaining earlier about, dividing the number of grams of sugar by 4, and you'll see even in a serving of the sweetened almond milk, how much sugar is really in it. You would never be stirring 2 teaspoons of sugar into 8 ounces of almond milk, But that's what the food companies are doing. It's insidious. It's everywhere. So.
It doesn't matter about bread. I mean, there's some good breads.
I'm going to, like I said earlier, with your joy eating, right? When you've planned 24 hours in advance, you've decided on Sunday morning you're going to go out for bagels or you're going to whatever, and you want to have your bread, as long as you've planned for it, you can have it.
That's my lunch.
Huh?
That's my lunch, a sandwich.
I'm going to really be honest with you. If you want to dine in and get your insulin down, eliminate this as much as you can. If you're eating bread every day and you have body fat on your body that you want to get rid of, eliminating this is going to help you access your body fat. Keeping this in your nutrition every day is not. It's just not orchestrated to do that for you. Our bodies just don't, it can't reduce the insulin. As soon as you ingest it, insulin goes up. Go ahead, John. Part of what happens with our metabolically, our system does slow down as we get older. That's just a part of the human process. But by eliminating processed foods, you are going to actually slow down that metabolic change. Because insulin and sugar is an oxidizing product in the body. Sugar attacks your skin. It attacks your organs. It rusts you out. Your skin, there's a process called glyceration. When you eat a lot of sugar, it starts to eat away at the underlying structure of your skin, the collagen that keeps your skin plump. It starts to eat away at that, rust away that underlying structure that holds your skin up. So if it does that externally to your skin, think about what it's doing to your insides. So it metabolically slows everything down because you're kind of rusting from the inside out. Make sense? Anything else, guys? Does it make sense? Does it make sense? Go ahead, Lauren. Cortisol, it's another hormone, and actually we're going to go into, in the next workshop, we're going to actually dive deep into some other hormones as well, like ghrelin and leptin, which are hunger-related hormones that your body makes. They get really thrown out of whack when you're doing flour and sugar. Cortisol is a stress hormone, right? And it's not only just the stress in our lives that create cortisol, which is produced by the adrenals to increase, but also eating processed foods creates stress within the body that actually calls the adrenals to produce more cortisol. So it's amazing how much of these different things that we deal with in this kind of evolved society that we live in is still so regulated by what we're eating, what we're ingesting. We don't even know. The food companies don't want you to know this. This stuff is just, this is like cutting edge stuff. This is cool, right? It's really cool. And I love talking about it because I'm passionate about it. I've been through the whole cycle. My whole life has been fighting food, fighting my natural biology, trying to be something I wasn't, trying to be the skinny toothpick chick, that epic fail. So, right? So this stuff is just really, I just love it. I just really love talking about it. And I want to share it with everybody, really. But anything else? No? Make sense? Okay. All right. Thank you.